Hi and welcome to section 4 on this course. So in this section, we are going to look at the concept of continuous integration. So let's go on to our first video in which we are going to look at what is continuous integration. Now, before we actually go into continuous integration, just a quick thought. Now, when it comes to development of applications in recent times, everybody or companies look towards agile development. So nowadays, application deployment and development needs more flexibility. And why is this the case? It's because more changes are being requested from customers. Now, customers have also become tech savvy and they understand that there are tools in the market, there are development patterns, design patterns to ensure that changes can be made to applications more frequently. And because of being tech savvy, they now know or they demand more from IT departments to make application changes more frequently. So what happens in this process is that you start getting many versions of your code base and you have to get out of the process of manually carrying out a build of your application code at various change feature requests. So let's look at the manual build process. So first you have the developer who makes a change to the code. He then checks in the code to a source code repository. So now mostly in companies, when you're working with source code changes, you would use a source code version management system such as Git. So you would upload your code, your changes to the code. You would then have a build manager. So this was in the past. You would have a build manager. They would have other software engineers who would actually build your code. So this was a manual build process for your code. They would either run a script or run the build commands to ensure that your code is built. Now, if there were any errors, the code would be rolled back, or you would actually make a notification to the developer to make the necessary changes. The error messages would be sent to the developer, and then those changes would be made, and then the entire build process would go on again. Now, this becomes kind of inefficient in nowadays systems because of the numerous change requests. So every time you have a change request, and this is very frequent, you can't expect the build manager to keep on making that build, this manual intervention process, because you have to understand that when you have large complex systems, the build process itself can take time. So it's not a matter of minutes. The build process could take hours. So every time when you have a change request, and suppose if the build fails and you have to roll back, this entire manual process is a headache. So in such a process, you have to automate your build process. So if there is a change, if the change is checked into your source code repository, you should automatically trigger a build. The build should not be a manual process. If it's a success, then that build is transferred onto whatever subsequent is the next environment. So it could be the staging environment, it could be a production environment. If there's a failure, you would notify the development team accordingly. Now, when it comes to continuous integration tools, one of the most popular tools, it's an open source tool that has been used for a lot of years, is Jenkins. So in Jenkins, some of the advantages are that you can actually build different types of code languages. So it could be C#, it could be Java. You could use Jenkins to build your code. You could run continuous automated builds using this tool. You could also include unit tests in your build or even integration tests. And it even has the facility to some extent to automate deployments. And it also has a lot of useful plugins. So it's a plugins which actually makes this Jenkins tool very powerful. And apart from being open source and free and also scalable, this is one of the most popular continuous integration tools out there. Now, when it comes to AWS, they have their own set of tools, and the advantage of having these tools is that these underlying infrastructure is completely managed by AWS. You don't need to manage the infrastructure yourself, and that's the biggest advantage of these tools. So we're going to look at these tools in subsequent videos. So we have AWS code commit. That's the Git version of what's available in AWS, your source code version repository. We then have code build. So this is used for building your code. And then you have a code pipeline which puts everything together. So let's go on to our next video. Let's look at the introduction to the AWS code commit service.